Yeah, friends, in the earlier class we have discussed the topic polity, the part 2. That is nothing but how the constituent assembly was formed and how the people were elected, what is the total representation of the constituent assembly, and what happened to the when the constituent assembly was met for the first time, that is on the 9th December 1946, and what happened on the same day that they selected a temporary president as Mr. Sachidananda Sinha, because he is the oldest member. And what happened on the 11th, they selected permanent president and the vice president. And what happened on the 13th, the historical objective resolution was moved, and all those things we've discussed. And what happened to the constituent assembly once the India got independence, those the things we discussed in the earlier class. So for those things, we're posing some questions over here on the topic discussed in Polity 2. The first question is like this: the basis for the preamble of the Indian Constitution, it is objective resolution, friends. So if someone asks you the what is the basis for the Indian Constitution, that is Government of India Act 1935. But if it is the basis for the preamble, that is the objective resolution moved by the Jawaharlal Nehru on behalf of Constituent Assembly in Constituent Assembly. So it has clearly said what are the aspirations, what are the expectations of the people from the Constituent Assembly, and what are the things to be included in Constitution. And the historical objective resolution was moved and adopted in Constituent Assembly on 13th December 1946, friends, and the same was accepted on 22nd January 1947. And the Indian national flag was adopted just before the independence, just 22 days before the independence, that is the 22nd July 1947. And the first acting president of the Indian Constituent Assembly of India was Dr. Sachidananda Sinha. And the first speaker of the Constituent Assembly is G.V. Mavlankar. These are the questions based on the previous topic. And we ended up at that India got independence and 299 members left in the Constituent Assembly, and we got a doubt that whether these 299 members were doing the same work or is there any other alternate. So we said that the constitution makers were very clever enough and they opted for the division of work by forming the committees. So what are the committees? There are several committees and we are discussing only important committees over here. The first committee we need to discuss is steering committee, friends. The steering committee, it is headed by Dr. Rajendra Prasad, and he is also heading two other committees, that is Rules and Procedure Committee and Finance and Staff Committee. And the second important committee is, friends, drafting committee, that is headed by Dr. B.R. Ambedkar. So the committees headed by Jawaharlal Nehru are Union Powers Committee and Union Constitution Committee and States Committee. And the committees headed by Sardar Patel are Provincial Constitution Committee and Advisory Committee on Fundamental Rights of Minorities and Tribal and Excluded Areas. And other important committees, Fundamental Rights Subcommittee, that is headed by J.B. Kripalani. So and among the there was a question on the in the exam for many times who headed the drafting committee, and there was most of the, and out of these committees the drafting committee is very important, friends, because what is the why this drafting committee is very important? Because it was entrusted with the task of preparation of the draft of the new constitution. So whatever the draft is going to be prepared, all are not working on the drafting. So drafting work is clearly assigned to this drafting committee, and this drafting committee chairman is appointed the chairman of the drafting committee is Dr. B.R. Ambedkar. He was appointed as a chairman of this drafting committee, and it was set up on 24th August 1947, and it consisted of 7 members. So they worked many days for the draft, and when this draft was completed, so they started work on 24th August 1947, friends, and they published their first draft in February 1948. And this draft was released to people of India, and they were given 8 months of time, and they could discuss and they could propose any amendments if required. So that was the plan, and that was published in 1948. And they said that after 8 months this will be discussed again. Then they given 8 months time. So after 8 months the second draft was published in October 1948, and now the final draft of the constitution was presented to Constitution Assembly on November 4th 1948. This date is important, November 4th 1948. Then so they prepared the Constitution of India was prepared by the drafting committee. So if drafting committee is prepared, is it sure that everyone will accept the same? So it need not be. So the drafting committee, is the draft directly accepted? No, it was not directly accepted. So what has been done? Like, then it was first discussed and then amended, and then amended where it required, and then finally adopted. So how it is discussed? The discussions here, we call it as reading, friends. The first reading. So when on November 4th 1948, this first draft of the constitution was presented to the Constituent Assembly. So the first reading was for 5 days, from 4th November 1948 to 9th November 1948. This is for 5 days, remember this. And the second reading, this is very important, this is the lengthiest reading, from 15th November, after the 6 days of the first reading, it started, and it almost for 11 months. 11 months, November to November 1948 to October 1949. During this stage, as many as 7,653 amendments were proposed. See this, numbers are in decreasing order. 7,653 amendments were proposed, and out of the 2,473 were actually discussed in assembly. And this is about the second reading. And what happened to the third and final reading? The third and final reading was between 14th November 1949 to 26th November 1949, friends. This is important. Third and final reading has started on 14th November 1949. Please remember the dates. On 14th November 1949, Dr. B.R. Ambedkar moved the motion to pass the constitution, to pass the draft of the constitution, and it was passed on 26th November 1949. And when it passed, it received the signature of all the 284 members. So we know that there are 299 members. You may get doubt that why the 284 members, because some members were ill, some members were died, and because of several reasons, the assembly was attended by 284 members, and they all have signed on the signature. All the signatures was received in the present in the assembly were received, and including the president. Thus the constitution was adopted and enacted on 26th November 1949. So that is the final, if there is any question that when was the drafting of constitution was completed, it should be said that 26th November 1949. So with the final reading and all the amendments, so the final constitution was ready on 26th November 1949. It has received the assent and signatures of all the 284 members and including the president. And the constitution was adopted and enacted on that November 26, 1949. It has a what it is having. It has a preamble. I'll say about the preamble. It is having 395 articles and 8 schedules, and and a preamble. I'll tell you about the preamble. What happened to the preamble actually? Actually, what is the story of the preamble? Enacted by the Constituent Assembly after the Constitution was already enacted, and it has having 395 articles and 8 schedules, and the preamble was enacted by the CA after the Constitution was already enacted. So first Constitution was enacted and it was passed and everyone has signed. Then the preamble was enacted, and this preamble was introduced by Jawaharlal Nehru. This is very important, Jawaharlal Nehru. And so drafting committee is headed by Dr. B.R. Ambedkar. So he is the man of the moment of this final reading and the day of when the constitution was passed, and he is the man of the moment. And this Dr. B.R. Ambedkar is called the father of Constitution of India, and is also called the chief architect of Constitution of India, and also the modern one. Right. So the constitution was adopted and enacted on 26th November 1949. But you may get doubt that why do we celebrate when the constitution was adopted and enacted on 26th November, then we should celebrate our Republic Day on 26th November only. So here is the twist. But on the 26th November 1949, the entire constitution did not come into force. Then what has come into force is only some provisions of the constitution pertaining to citizenship, elections, provisional parliament, temporary and transitional provisions, a short title came into force. So on 26th November, and the entire constitution came into force from 26th January 1950. That is the reason we celebrate 26th January as a Republic Day, because the entire constitution has come into force. And there is some historical background to this 26th January. And because what is the historical importance? We used to celebrate the 26th January as Purna Swaraj Day. So this 26th January is also called as the Purna Swaraj Day. Here we discuss some important tasks by Constituent Assembly. So what it has done. So Constituent Assembly has adopted national anthem Janagana Mana and national song Vande Mataram on 24th January 1950. So on 24th January 1950, this Constituent Assembly has adopted national anthem Janagana Mana as the national anthem and Vande Mataram as the national song. And it elected Dr. Rajendra Prasad as the first president of India on the same day, 24th January 1950. It also elected Dr. Rajendra Prasad, who is the chairman of the who is the president of the Constituent Assembly or the chairman of the Constituent Assembly, has become the first president of India. And if we discuss some of the facts about the Constituent Assembly, the total time taken by making the Constitution is 2 years, 11 months and 18 days. See, imagine that this is the lengthiest time taken by the Constitution makers. So from when it is started? From 9th December 1946. This was the first time they met, and to 26th November 1949. These are the 2 dates. Between these 2 days, the 2 years, 11 months and 18 days took place. And what is the total expenditure incurred is 64 lakhs. The total expenditure incurred by the Constituent Assembly to make the Constitution is 64 lakhs. This 64 lakhs nowadays, like if you see now, it's very, you may think that it's a salary of a person for 1 year. But 64 lakhs in 1946 and 1947, you imagine the economy of the India, economic status of the India. Spending 64 lakhs means like now you are spending for Mars Mom project, nearly hundreds of crores. So it's equal to that amount. And the constitution, how this constitution has been made. So these constitution makers have gone through several constitutions of different countries, and about nearly 60 countries to prepare our constitution. So they borrowed some of the concepts from the other constitutions, and they included in our constitutions. Then sources of the constitution, the major sources of the constitution, here I am discussing. The first source of the constitution is 1935. It gives the structure of federal state and everything. 1935 Act, India Government of India Act 1935 is the first thing, and it has given the role of a governor and etc. kind of things we discussed in the earlier class. And the second source is the British Constitution. It gave the parliamentary government and cabinet system and the parliamentary privileges and bicameralism. Like bicameralism, we said the Britishers have introduced in our, and it also introduced single citizenship. The single citizenship question was asked nearly 3 to 4 times in the exam. Friends, this is very important. See, in SSCGL the questions will be repeated again and again. And they have also adopted from US Constitution the fundamental rights, judicial review and the independent judiciary, and impeachment of the fundamental rights are taken from US Constitution, and judicial review also taken from US Constitution, impeachment of the president taken from US Constitution, and removal of Supreme Court and High Court judges also taken from US Constitution. And directive principles of state policy, that those are taken from Irish Constitution, and the nomination of Rajya Sabha member, method of election of president is taken from Irish Constitution. And federation with a strong center, it is taken from Canadian Constitution, federation with a strong center. And central residual powers, appointment of state governments by center. So Canadian government, it has given some central powers. And Australian Constitution, it gave the concurrent list. So concurrent list means the things which are common for state and as well as the country. So if we go to depth into the subject, state means like the state, like Maharashtra, Karnataka, such a state. So, and freedom of trade and joint sitting of the parliament is taken from Australian Constitution. So there are some of the questions asked on this kind of sources also, friends. Please go through these sources. You may not emergency provisions are taken from German Constitution, and see fundamental duties are taken from Russia, and amendment procedure is taken from South Africa Constitution, and election of members of Rajya Sabha taken from South Africa. And here we have discussed that Rajya Sabha, nomination of Rajya Sabha is from Irish Constitution, but election was taken from South Africa Constitution. And Republic and ideals of liberty, equality, fraternity in the preamble was taken from French Constitution, and Japanese Constitution, procedure established is taken from the Japanese Constitution. These are the very important. You may not understand now what are these things What is impeachment? Impeachment means the procedure to remove the president. And what are the fundamental rights? What are the directive principles of state policy? Once we get into the subject, you come across all these things. But just read, give a read of all these things, so that it will be easy for you to understand the next concepts while moving to the topics. Okay, friends, this is what part 3. So what we have discussed in part 3. So we have discussed the different committees, and steering committees headed by Rajendra Prasad, and Union Powers Committee headed by Jawaharlal Nehru, and drafting committee headed by Ambedkar, and provincial constitution committee headed by Sardar Patel, and advisory committee by Sardar Patel, and those are the important committees. And drafting committee was set up on 24th August 1947, and they gave first draft in February for the people, and they gave 8 months time, and second draft in October 1948, and final draft on November 4th 1948, and it has read for 3 times, for first for 5 days, and second for 11 months, and third for almost for 12 days. So on 26th November and 14th November the resolution was moved to pass the constitution, and 26th November it was passed. 26th November 1949 it was passed, and with the 395 articles and 8 schedules, and the preamble was enacted by the Constitution Assembly after the Constitution was already enacted. So the next step was preamble, and this preamble was introduced by Jawaharlal Nehru, and where Ambedkar was called father of Constitution of India, chief architect of Constitution of India, and modern Manu, and some entire Constitution came into effect from 26th January, and we celebrate that day as Republic Day. And the some of the other tasks were by this Constituent Assembly was they adopted national anthem and national song as Vande Mataram, and they elected Dr. Rajendra Prasad as the first president on 24th January 1950. Some of the facts that the time taken to form the constitution is 2 years, 11 months and 18 days, and the total expenditure incurred was 64 lakhs, and they have gone through different sources. The sources of the constitution was given here. So this is the class. To know the model questions on this topic, please go through the next video of next class. Please go through the next class and video of Indian polity, and don't forget to subscribe VFocus, and don't forget to inform your friends who are preparing for SSC CGL about the classes. Thank you very much. Have a nice day.